Welcome back. Now, the Israeli military says it's encouraging people in the south of Gaza in Rafah to move towards a designated humanitarian zone. It comes ahead of what's expected to be an offensive on part of the city where more than 1.4 million people are sheltering. Well, let's speak now to Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, Israel's special foreign ministry envoy and the former deputy mayor of Jerusalem. Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, thanks very much for making the time to speak to us. So it would appear from that evacuation order that an offensive into that part of Rafah is imminent. How safe do you think the hostages are going to be if that offensive goes on?
Well, that's really the question. And this is why for the last 2 months, we have been trying to make a deal with Hamas for a temporary ceasefire for exchange for our hostages, at least in the first stage, for our hostages in the worst type of humanitarian condition. And 5 consecutive times, Hamas has refused to accept any deals. And yesterday, from the humanitarian zone in Rafah, they threw rockets at the humanitarian entry point, Kerem Shalom, where our soldiers were there in order to make sure that the food was coming in, the much needed humanitarian aid, and they killed 4 of our young soldiers. That was yesterday.
So the offensive has to go forward now, despite the fact that there are some 130 hostages there still.
We would have loved to have done a deal with Hamas, and they keep refusing. They keep refusing. What choice does Israel have? Not only is our country in danger because we have there a genocidal regime who have said they will commit the worst atrocities to Jews that we've seen since the Holocaust. And by the way, today is Holocaust Remembrance Day, but because they're also a threat to the entire region, not just to Israel.
Now, this place where the Palestinians are now meant to go to, Al-Mawasi, designated a safe zone, but just how safe is it? The UN have said that it's not fit to take people. 400,000 people are there at the moment. Another 100,000 are expected to go. What facilities are in place to make sure that those people will have the necessary aid that they need?
Well, put it this way, which army tells ahead of time its enemy, the Hamas regime, where it's going to be attacking in order to protect their people? Hamas does exactly the opposite. They're committing a double war crime by leaving their people in harm's way whilst they're hiding like cowards in tunnels.
Okay.
And so we are doing everything we can.
Yeah.
We've done from the beginning everything we can in order to avoid any civilian casualties. We're in the middle of a horrible urban war. What is Israel expected to do? More than warn its enemy. Who does that?
Fleur, this is a very specific question, though. What more has been put into that place? Because you'll know Al-Mawasi was said not to be fit for people to be held. Some 400,000 are there now. Another 100,000 are going to go. It's going to be, over 500,000 people there with very limited facilities to be going to summer. What extra has been put in there to make sure that those people displaced have the necessary aid that they need?
The same thing was said of southern Gaza, if you remember, a few months back. And everybody managed fine. And so I'm sure that between the Israeli army and the different humanitarian aid organizations working, there will be enough facilities there to be able to get people out of harm's way. We're talking about getting people out of harm's way.
Managing fine might be challenged by some of those people there, some of those 1.4 million people there who are struggling to survive. And you'll know that the head of the United Nations World Food Programme, Cindy McCain, has just in the last day said that there is a famine, a full-blown famine in northern Gaza that's making its way south.
Well, it's very difficult to agree with her when we know that 500 tons of humanitarian aid has gone in all of these months, which is more than they had even before the war. So perhaps there are issues, but the issues are in the distribution, partly that they're in charge of, and not in the supply, which Israel is actually facilitating.
So you're saying there's no issue with getting that aid into Gaza? You'll know that
the issue is not getting the aid in. And if Hamas really cared about its people, why did it bomb one of the entrances, Kerem Shalom, for that aid only yesterday, killing 4 of our young soldiers?
So the aid is getting in fine. That's what you're saying. It's the distribution.
I'm saying there's enough aid. It's the distribution that's a problem. And we've been saying this for a while. And we've opened extra distribution points. And one of them, I repeat, was bombed yesterday by Hamas.
Yep. So you're saying that the famine is being caused by the lack of distribution by the Hamas authorities within Gaza?
Well, Hamas are a terrorist group. We know that they've been stealing 50 to 60% of the aid, and some of them are even selling it in the open market. So the problem here is not Israel.
Where does this go next then? You're going to go into Rafah, this part of Rafah. The 130 hostages or so that are still there will then be in a war zone. Don't you want to bring the hostages home alive? And how is increasing the fighting there going to achieve that aim?
Well, this is the second time you asked me the same question. We've been trying 5 times. We had deals on the table, deals that the Americans said were very fair to Hamas, and they refused to accept this deal. We know that the last 5 battalions of the terrorist soldiers are in Rafah. We know that Sinwar, the head of the snake, the Osama bin Laden in the story, is in Rafah. What is Israel supposed to do? Wait until the next October 7th? What would your country do if they had been attacked so brutally?
The reason I ask you the question again is because you'll know that there is growing anger among the families within Israel right now for their loved ones to come home, and
I don't blame them. I don't blame them.
Absolutely, and there have been protests.
And I have many friends who unfortunately also have children in this situation. But more than Israel offer 5 times a deal for a temporary ceasefire in exchange, not for 130 hostages. We were already talking about 30, 40 hostages. And Hamas has said no. Again, what are we supposed to do?
You'll know that there's pressure from some allies as well to not carry out this assault into Rafah. Will Israel go ahead despite the fact that some allies have called for there to be greater restraint? You know that's not the first time that allies have called for there to be restraint in this instance.
Well, I think the allies were calling for restraint about a month and a half ago when they still thought that it was possible to make a deal with Hamas, when you had the mediation of Egypt, of Qatar, and there was some optimism. But Hamas, again, intransigence of not making the deal that even President Biden said last week and Antony Blinken said last week, Hamas are crazy for not taking this deal. So again, what is Israel supposed to do?
Okay. Fleur Hassan-Nahoum from the Foreign Ministry of Israel, thanks very much for speaking to us. Thank you.
Thank you.